Opening with the gentle chime of silver against metal, picture this: a small, unassuming piece of pocket change that, when held just right, seems to hum with a story decades in the making. Today's journey begins with one such coin, your everyday 1995 United States quarter, yet it isn't everyday at all. Underneath that familiar Washington profile lies a world of nuance, scarcity, and hidden mistakes that can tip its worth from 25 cents to hundreds, even thousands of dollars. Stick around as we peel back the layers of history, minting quirks, and market madness that make the 1995 quarter a true prize for anyone lucky enough to spot one in circulation. Let's step back to the mid-1990s. The Soviet Union has fallen, grunge has taken over the airwaves, and DVDs are just about to change how we watch movies. In the United States, the quarter you dropped in pay phones and parking meters bore a design first introduced in 1932. George Washington's stern visage on the obverse, and on the reverse, an eagle with outstretched wings clutching arrows and an olive branch. By 1995, though, the reverse eagle design was nearing the end of its run, just 2 years shy of being replaced by the 50-state quarters program in 1999. That transition makes the last few years of the eagle-back quarters especially compelling. Collectors realized these final issues stood at the threshold of a new era in U.S. coinage. One foot in tradition, the other stepping into a novel commemorative future. Within that context, the 1995 quarter becomes more than pocket change. It's a farewell to a design seen by millions every day, a snapshot of American coinage on the verge of transformation. Demand among seasoned collectors shot up as soon as the state quarters announcement dropped in late 1997. People rushed to fill holes in Whitman folders, bank rolls were scoured, and dealers raised premiums on those last-of-the-line eagle reverses. But today, decades later, it's not just the design swan song that fuels interest. It's the minute details, in some cases literal die cracks or doubled letters, that turn a common-date quarter into a museum-worthy rarity. First, let's zero in on what to look for. The standard 1995 quarter carries a mint mark, either P for Philadelphia or D for Denver, just to the right of Washington's ponytail ribbon. Mintage figures were high, roughly $498 million from Philadelphia and $289 million from Denver. On its face, that suggests abundance, not scarcity. But within those millions lurk anomalies. One of the most sought after is the doubled die obverse. Under magnification, you can see a faint doubling on the letters United States of America and sometimes on Washington's hair strands. It's subtle, more a ghost of a line than a bold second stroke, but that ghost can be worth a literal fortune. A finely struck double die obverse in mint state can fetch upward of $1,200 at auction, depending on the severity of the doubling and overall surface quality. Here's why. Doubled dies occur when the hub that impresses the design into the working die shifts slightly between impressions. The result is two misaligned images on the die itself, and every coin struck from that die carries the doubling. In 1995, a handful of these defective dies made it through quality control at the Philadelphia Mint before being retired. The surviving coins are estimated in the low hundreds, making them rare among a population of nearly 500 million. Condition is everything. A grade of MS65, Mint State 65, might bring $400 to $600. Push that to MS67, and you could cross the four-figure threshold. Beyond doubled dies, there's the dramatic die crack variety. In some specimens, a thin raised line snakes across the reverse eagle's wing or drifts into the field near the rim. These cracks form when the steel die fractures under repeated strikes. Early on, the crack is hairline, almost invisible without magnification. Left unchecked, it widens until the die is retired. Coins from the mid-stage of that progression carry the most dramatic cracks. Think a lightning bolt arcing across the coin's reverse. Collectors prize these as road map errors. They tell a visual story of the die's slow breakdown. Auction records show that a demint 1995 quarter with a prominent reverse die crack, graded U58, sold for $350 in 2023, while an MS64 example broke the $800 barrier in 2024. Let's talk eye appeal, because two coins with identical numerical grades can trade at wildly different prices based on color, luster, and contact marks. A flawless gem-quality MS67 specimen, with crisp original mint luster and no hairlines or bag marks, can command a premium of 50 to 100% over a typical MS67. That difference alone can be several $100s. For circulated grades, the threshold for collector interest is VF30, very fine, where details in Washington's hair and the eagle's feathers are still clear. In VF30, a common example might trade for $1.50 to $2.50, just a small bump over face value. But if that VF30 shows an attractive cartwheel luster or an unusual toning pattern, you could see $10 to $15 or more. To put real numbers on the board, according to the Professional Coin Grading Service, PCGS, population report, only 15 pieces from 1995P have been certified at MS67 or higher with the double die obverse variety, and just 7 at MS68. At MS68, values can spike to $1,500 to $2,000 apiece, depending on market conditions and the presence of eye appeal factors like iridescent toning. Compare that to a regular 1995P quarter in MS68, of which there are over 3,000 certified, that might fetch $50 to $70. The multiplier for an error coin is staggering. We shouldn't overlook the no mint mark 1995P pieces either. For a brief period, mint workers forgot to add the P to some dies, creating a distinct variety, Washington without a mint mark in the ribbon. Estimates suggest only a few thousand of these no-mark quarters exist. In average circulated grades, they trade for $5 to $10. In MS63, it's $20 to $30. And if you find a pristine MS66 no-mint mark, you could be looking at $200 to $300 on today's market. Of course, scarcity is only one side of the coin. These pieces also carry stories. One legendary find occurred in 2018, when a Pennsylvania collector unearthed a roll of 1995P quarters in pocket change. Within that roll were 2 no-mint mark varieties and a lone example of the double die obverse. He sold the trio as a lot for $3,200, an average of more than $1,000 per coin, on what had started as $4 worth of change. That story rippled through collecting forums, sparking renewed interest in hunting found in circulation eagleback quarters. Condition variations create another layer of intrigue. Let's say you have a 1995D quarter-graded AU55. You'll likely see some light where on Washington's cheek and hair, and the eagle's breast feathers will show slight smoothing. In that state, a typical market value is $3 to $5. But if the device remains sharply struck, with excellent peripheral rim definition and a faint cartwheel effect under direct light, premiums push it to $8 to $12. Move up to MS63, and you cross from single-digit dollars into the $15 to $25 range. That's the sweet spot for many collectors who want a balance between affordability and high-grade appeal. Less common is the 1995D double die obverse. Only a dozen or so have been certified by PCGS in any grade. An MS64 brought $1,100 in a 2022 Heritage auction. An MS65 hit $1,800 just last fall. Even in a U58, you're looking at a $400 to $500 price tag, still a hefty markup over a standard AU58 that might go for $2 to $3. Then there's toning, the natural patina that develops on silver and copper-nickel coins over time. While some collectors shy away from brown or gray surfaces, others chase vibrant blues, purples, and golds. A 1995 quarter with intense, multi-hued toning, especially on the high points of Washington's hair and the eagle's wing, can add 30 to 50% to the base value, provided the toning is appealing and doesn't obscure details. One MS66 1995P quarter with electric blue and deep purple rim toning sold for $2,200 in early 2025, roughly double the norm for that grade. With that in mind, take a deep breath, peer closely at the next 1995 quarter you encounter, and ask yourself, is this just change, or is it something much more? And now, shifting gears from the mid-90s Eagle reverse into the quieter world of the late Cold War era, let's zero in on the 1980 United States quarter. At first glance, it looks like every other Washington quarter you've handled. Same profile, same eagle, but beneath the surface lie quirks and mistakes that turn pocket change into prized collectibles. If you thought the 95 errors were subtle, Wait until you see what turned up on those 1980 dies. The story begins in 1980 at two mints, Philadelphia, no mint mark, and Denver, D. That year saw enormous mintages, over 544 million from Philadelphia and nearly 267 million from Denver, driven by demand for everyday coinage in a still-growing economy. The design, unchanged since 1932, was in its penultimate decade before the state quarters program shook things up. In that sense, the 1980 quarter stands as a bridge, a workhorse of commerce, yet also one of the last plain quarters before the commemorative revolution. Within those hundreds of millions lurk error varieties that can elevate a 25-cent piece into four-figure territory. One of the most dramatic is the off-center strike. In properly centered coins, George Washington's profile and the eagle's wings hug the rim evenly. But on off-center pieces, part of the design is cut off, and you see blank fields where metal wasn't struck. Collectors classify these by the degree of off-centering. 1 to 4% is barely noticeable, 5 to 10% is obvious, and beyond 15% can leave nearly half the design missing. In 1980D, a 12% off-center quarter graded MS64 sold for $450 in 2022. Push that to 20% and MS63, and prices can climb past $800, simply because the visual impact is so much greater. Why do these occur? The planchet, blank metal disc, sometimes shifts or fails to seat fully in the collar die before the strike. The result, an incomplete impression. Early die stages yield crisp, if partial, designs. Later on, the misfeeds become more erratic, producing a fascinating array of crop circle coins. The rarer the degree of misalignment, the more collectors will pay. A single Philadelphia off-center of 18% can easily top $1,200 if graded above AU55. Next up, double dies on the obverse. Unlike the ghostly doubling we saw on the 1995 quarter, 1980 double die obverse can be bold, especially on the motto, "In God We Trust," and the date. You might spot thickening or splitting of letters, most evident in the trust or the serif on the 1 of 1980. PCGS population reports show fewer than 100 certified double die obverse 1980p quarters, with only a handful above MS65. An MS66 example realized $2,300 at a Channel Islands auction in late 2023, and MS64 brought $650 2 years earlier. The doubling often extends into Washington's cheek and hair, giving his portrait an almost 3D effect under magnification. Die cracks are another story, literally lines that snake across the surface as the steel fatigues. On the reverse, look for cracks branching from the rim into the eagle's wing or across the olive branch. Early cracks are hairline. The most dramatic appear as raised ribbons several millimeters wide. A 1980D quarter with a pronounced reverse die crack sold raw, uncertified, for $120 on an online auction in 2021. The same specimen, once slabbed as EF45, went for $350 in 2024. The crack variety bridges the gap between subtle double dies and eye-catching off-centers, offering something for every level of collector. Perhaps the most visually intriguing error is the broad strike. Here the collar die fails to restrain the planchet, so the coin spreads outward, creating a thin, wide flan with no reeded edge. The result is a smooth rim, noticeably larger diameter, and often an incomplete design. Broad strike 1980p quarters in AU50 have sold for $75 to $100. In MS63, you're looking at $200 to $300. The premium comes from both the novelty and the fact that broad strikes rarely survive in high grade. Planchets often slip or nick against the press. Mint mark anomalies add another layer. In mid-1980, some Denver dies were repunched, leaving a faint secondary D beneath the primary mint mark. These repunched mint marks, RPMs, appear as shadows or serifs around the D on the obverse ribbon. Collectors split them into RPM 001, RPM 002, etc., based on the repunch orientation. A Denver repunched mint mark quarter in MS65 fetched $1,100 at Stacksbowers in 2023, while an MS63 went for about $450. RPMs tell a die maintenance tale. Mint workers hand-punch the mint mark into the die, then sometimes adjust it to center, Those adjustments get immortalized on the coins. For those who chase subtlety, there's the double die reverse. Less common than obverse doubling. It shows as doubling on the eagle's wing feathers, the branch, or the legend, United States of America. A 1980p double die reverse graded MS66 brought $1,800 in March 2024. In MS64, examples trade around $400 to $500. Because reverse doubling often goes unnoticed, many coins remain unrecognized in collections, waiting for someone to catch that extra line in the wing. Now let's talk condition and eye appeal. In circulated grades, the threshold for collector interest starts around VF30, where the eagle's feathers and Washington's hair remain distinct. A VF30, 1980p might command $1.25 to $2, just a bump over face value. Yet if that VF30 displays attractive cameo contrast, frosted devices against a satiny field, it can fetch $8 to $12. At EF40, a typical quarter goes for $2 to $3, but EF40 with deep cartwheel luster and a hint of iridescent toning can reach $15 to $20. Mint state coins open a new world. An MS60 quarter, raw, sells for $5 to $7. By MS63, you're in the $12 to $18 range for a standard strike. But MS65 is the magic line. Only a few thousand 1980p and under 1,000 1980D quarters earn that grade. A clean MS65 Plus standard issue can command $30 to $40. Add a premium cameo designation, and you might see $60 to $75. That's still nothing compared to error examples. MS65 double dies or RPMs trade in the hundreds to low thousands. Toning again plays a role. Natural gold, violet, and teal hues along the rim can elevate prices by 20 to 30% if the patina is even and attractive. One MS66 1980p quarter with electric orange rim toning sold for $900 in January 2025, nearly doubling its non-toned counterpart. Collectors call these sunset toners, and they spark bidding wars when the lighting catches that vivid halo. Provenance can push values further. A 1980D off-center quarter from the Johnson find of 2010, where an entire bank bag of misstruck coins emerged in Kansas, sold for $1,250 in 2022, despite grading only a U55. Buyers paid for the story as much as the error. The bag was once displayed at a local historical society, then dispersed at auction. Coins with documented pedigrees often carry a 10 to 15% premium over similar uncertified pieces. It's worth noting the relative rarity of certain varieties. Off-center strikes above 15% represent under 0.01% of the total mintage, double die obverse fewer than 0.005%, RPMs around 0.02%. That scarcity matrix, error type versus population, drives collector behavior. A moderately off-center 1980p may trade hands dozens of times in a given year. A bold double die reverse might only appear at auction once or twice. For the dedicated collector, pursuing high-grade errors means balancing cost and availability. If your budget tops out at $300, you can aim for an MS64 RPM or a VF35 off-center. Step up to $1,000, and MS65 double dies or broad strikes become realistic. Above $2,000, you enter the realm of top-pop MS66 examples with pedigrees and eye appeal designations. Always check the latest auction catalogs, Heritage, Stax Bowers, and even specialist error coin forums to benchmark realized prices. So next time you cradle a 1980 quarter between finger and thumb, pause to consider, is this just 25 cents? Or is it the echo of a die's final gasp, a mint worker's misstep, or a colorful journey through time? That unassuming disc might just be your ticket to the fascinating world of error coin collecting, a world where ordinary change becomes a gateway to history, mystery, and the thrill of the find. Sliding effortlessly from the 1997 quarter's hidden world of doubling, clashes, and off-center drama, let's turn our attention to the 1987 Washington quarter. At first glance, a 1987 piece seems as ordinary as any coin jangling in your pocket. But beneath that familiar face lies a suite of minting quirks, grade rarities, and error varieties that can turn a 25-cent piece into a subtle jackpot. Whether you inherited a handful of these coins, discovered them in circulation, or picked up rolls from the bank. This deep dive will equip you to spot the rarest survivors, understand their backstory, and appreciate how condition shapes their market value. The 1987 quarter sits squarely in the modern copper-nickel clad era, nearly a quarter century into the post-1965 design. That year, the U.S. Mint struck business coins at Philadelphia, no mint mark, and Denver, D, with combined mintage hovering around 715 million, making everyday circulation plentiful but hardly guaranteeing error fines. San Francisco's proof facility turned out collector-grade S issues, complete with mirrored fields and frosted devices, packaged in annual proof sets. The die hubs, presses, and quality control checks of '87 were largely routine, yet minor missteps yielded a handful of collectible anomalies. At the heart of any error search is knowing what a normal 1987 quarter looks like. The obverse presents Washington's bust, Liberty above and the date just under the truncation of his ponytail. The reverse bears the eagle, wings outstretched, clutching arrows and olive branch, with $quarter below. Rim thickness, letter spacing, and relief height remain consistent across business strikes, so any hint of variation deserves further scrutiny. One of the more accessible errors to spot is die doubling on the obverse. On a double die obverse, portions of Liberty, the date, or the motto "I in God we trust" display faint secondary impressions. Unlike the bold, textbook doubling of some earlier years, the 1987 double die is subtle, a ghost image along the outer edges of letters. In MS-63, MS-65 grades, this subtle doubling can lift value from a baseline $8 to $12 to $40 to $60. In MS-66, well-defined examples command $80 to $120, and true specialists will pay $200 plus for an MS-67 piece with crisp doubling and clean fields. A more dramatic variety is the off-center strike. While minor misalignments happen occasionally, the 1987 series produced a handful of coins with 5 to 8% off-center, meaning the design shifts noticeably toward one side, leaving a blank crescent of metal. At 5% off-center in AU condition, values start around $75 and climb to $150 to $200 in uncirculated grades. Extreme examples, 10% or more off-center, are especially prized. Even a worn 10% off-center quarter can fetch $250 to $350, while mint state survivors approach $500 to $700, depending on eye appeal. Die chips and cut errors add another layer of intrigue. A die chip occurs when a fragment breaks away from the die, leaving a raised blob on subsequent strikes. Common chip locations for 1987 quarters include the eagle's tail feathers, the rim near the date, or Washington's neck truncation. Small chips might be worth only a modest premium, $10, $20 in circulated grades, but larger cuts that intrude on design elements can command $50 to $100, especially when fully captured in mint state. Perhaps the rarest error in the 1987 quarter series is the broad strike variety. A broad strike happens when a planchet isn't properly constrained by the collar during striking, allowing metal to flow outward and producing a coin slightly larger in diameter with a flattened, smooth rim. Only a handful of broad strikes are known from 1987, typically discovered in proof sets where the collar sometimes failed to engage. These broad strikes measure roughly 25.8 millimeters instead of the standard 24.3 millimeters. In any grade, a genuine 1987 broad strike quarter can demand $300 to $600, with pristine proof-like examples reaching into four figures among specialized collectors. Proof quarters open an additional window into error collecting. San Francisco proofs rely on polished dies, but if grease or debris lodges in the recesses, letters or design areas may appear filled or blurred, called die fill errors. On 1987's quarters, the motto E pluribus unum and the mint mark S are common die fill hotspots. Light die fill specimens trade for $50 to $75. More pronounced fill and mirror fields pushes prices to $100 to $150. A fully mirrored proof with strong die fill contrast and no bag marks can cross $200, especially when slabbed by top services. For those chasing grade rarities more than errors, Population reports show that MS-67 is the tipping point for the 1987 quarter. MS-65. MS-66 business strikes are plentiful and trade for $15 to $30. MS-67 coins are scarce, often commanding $75 to $120. A certified MS-68, a virtual unicorn, once sold for $900 in a major auction, reflecting how high-grade survivors vault past typical price curves. Philadelphia examples often edge out Denver in price at the highest grades, due to slightly lower mint populations. Condition-based values for standard business strikes look like this. Circulated VG10, F12 coins trade at $0.25 to $1. 50 to 58 Australian dollar specimens bring $1 to $3. MS60, MS63 uncirculated pieces go for $3 to $8. MS64, MS65 are $10 to $25. MS66 commands $30 to $50. MS67 reaches $75 to $120. Errors multiply these base values by factors of 2 to 10, depending on severity and eye appeal. Beyond error premiums and grade premiums lies the human side of collecting. One enthusiast recounts discovering a modest die chip on Washington's truncation while sorting through pocket change. What looked like a stray lint fiber under a loop turned out to be raised metal. That quarter later sold for $95. Another collector found a subtle double die obverse in a roll bought from a bank ATM. The coin's doubling only showed under raking light. After grading, it sold for $180. A third story involves a proof set broad strike. Tucked into a USPS mint set, a single quarter lay slightly oversized. Its owner nearly tossed it back into circulation until a chance forum post revealed its true identity and a value north of $1,200. Understanding the mechanical origins of these errors deepens appreciation. Off-center strikes occur when planchets feed improperly, slipping past the collar that normally contains the metal flow. Die doubling results from multi-step hub impressions. If the die shifts even a fraction of a millimeter between impressions, a second image stamps onto the surface. Broad strikes emerge when the collar fails to close fully, often from wear or improper maintenance. Die chips grow as pressure and metal fatigue fracture small sections of the die. Recognizing these processes helps collectors know where to look. Rims for broad strikes, letter edges for doubling, blank crescents for off-centers, and raised blobs for chips. To inspect your 1987 quarters, start with good lighting and a 5-10 times loop. Hold coins at a low angle to reveal doubling or clash marks. Rotate them under a light source to pick up die fill areas and proofs. Measure suspect broad strikes against a known standard or use digital calipers to confirm diameter differences. Document your finds with high-resolution photos before sending them for third-party grading. Clear images of error areas and full coin shots help graders assign correct designations and grades. Having journeyed through 3 decades of Washington quarters, from the error-rich 1991 issues to the double-die drama of 1997, and now the multifaceted surprises of 1987, you've gained a toolkit for spotting rarity in everyday change. You understand historical contexts, mechanical origins, condition-based values, and the collector stories that bring these coins to life. With this knowledge in hand, each quarter you examine becomes more than pocket change. It's a potential doorway to numismatic discovery. Happy hunting, and may your next find be the one that transforms your collection.